Welcome back to Let's Talk Adoption. I'm Kim King, and I'm here back today with a second part of our discussion about older child adoption with social worker Linda Rotz. Linda, thank you for being back here today as we continue this pretty big conversation.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yes, and as we were just kind of chit-chatting before we started recording, um, there are so many deeper layers to everything we're talking about that you may need a little more specialty guidance as you're going through and preparing for older child adoption, but we're here to kind of keep it more at the basics level, right, and address common concerns. And today we're going to talk about myths versus reality and just some of the ins and outs, but just know that this is a topic that can actually be much larger than even these 2 or 3 episodes are going to be able to unpack for us.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah. So picking up kind of where we left off, I wanted to ask you, why do you think it is that some families are more drawn to older child adoption? Maybe not versus newborn adoption, but they really want to adopt a child that's a little bit older, and that's kind of their vision that they have that draws them to adopt. They want to help a child that's a little older.
I think first and foremost, when people see stories, they hear things online, they have friends that maybe have adopted older children, they have empathy for it. But if they dig a little bit deeper, it may be that they're a little bit older and they've raised their own children and they still have a heart, to move forward and maybe adopt a child that is in need that's a little bit older and they don't want to do the infant stage. Um,
Mm-hmm.
another another thing could be is that they're more comfortable knowing the history of the family. So sorry,
It's
knowing the
okay.
history of the family, um, because with infant adoption, sometimes you don't know that information, especially if it's coming from foster care situations. Sometimes you don't know, but when there's a child that's verbal and older, maybe in the teenage years, um, they can tell you eventually when they want to, when they're ready to. It's not going to be on your timeline, it's going to be on theirs. But
Mm-hmm.
that's another thing that you will eventually know their history. And with older children, it's important, there's a transition period where you get to know each other before a child comes into your home, so that you can make sure that this is going to work. And there may be some evaluations necessary that you will be a part of, but in theory, um, it's a shorter wait time in
Mm-hmm.
terms of, this child is already waiting to be adopted, and it's different because you're not waiting to be chosen. It's the opposite. Here's a child, and we need a family that is experienced and able to step up and, love this child and, nurture this child into becoming a successful adult.
Mm-hmm. And it sounds to me like children being available who are older and you not being chosen by a birth parent, that's more in the foster system. It's kind of like, is that is that right? This is more in the foster system that a child is waiting to be
So
adopted?
yes, there are some older children that are waiting to be adopted. I mean, sometimes it does happen privately. Um,
Mm.
but most of the time, older children that are waiting to be adopted are from the foster care system.
Mm.
Um, older children that may be waiting to be adopted or privately may not be as old. So
Right.
we're not
Okay.
talking, most of the time we're not talking about, middle schoolers or teenagers in the private sector.
Mm-hmm.
But there may be a circumstance where there's toddlers, and a middle schooler as a sibling group,
Right.
and
Yeah.
we totally try to place siblings together.
Mm-hmm.
It is in the best interest of all of them to be together most of the time. But again, there are always situations where you have to, evaluate what is better for each child. So, it's another situation that you have to dig deeper on.
Hmm. I feel like some families feel drawn to an older child adoption, not not from a point of I think I'll adopt an older child, but because they see a need. Their life
Yes.
path crosses paths with someone who has a need
Yes, that's true.
and they feel called, or they perhaps already know the child, like you were saying, it can take a little while before a child can be legally able to be adopted. Um, at first, they could just be being fostered. And have you thought of too, or ever seen where a CASA would adopt a child that he or she, a court, what is it, court appointed special advocate, that sometimes
I've seen,
maybe
yes.
they,
So you have the terminology is different in different states.
okay.
So yes, CASA or guardian ad litem,
Uh,
court appointed anybody that is,
mhm,
responsible for ensuring the well-being of the child, that is
mhm,
an outside party to the court system. Um, yes, I have seen that
mhm,
many times. I have
mhm,
seen caseworkers adopt. I have seen teachers adopt. I have seen, friends, neighbors, when you're working in the foster care system, we have a process called family finding. And in that process, the first thing that you look for is family members. Then you look for influential people in their life. And then you look, towards maybe teachers or advocates or people, professionals that may have experience with working with children. And then you look for, if none of those, if all of those options are exhausted, then you really look outside the box to see if you can find a family for the child.
mhm.
So in foster care, you're finding a family. In private, you know, they're finding you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the birth
So
mom, the placing parent is
yeah,
finding
the
you.
placing,
Yeah.
yes, the placing
Hmm.
parent is looking, but in foster care, it's definitely like we're looking at the needs of the child. Um, and even privately, if we had an older child come to Lifetime,
Hmm.
um, we would look at, okay, what are the needs of that child?
Hmm.
We would get information from schools, we would get evaluations done, we would find out what is their family history, what happened. Um, because it's important to find a family that is able to work with whatever that situation is. And it's all situational.
Hmm.
So, it's about trying to find a match that isn't going to fall apart. And a family has to dig deep because they 100% have to be committed. Um, you know, you know, once the placement occurs, you will get all of the help that can be given to, assist in making this a successful match. But you have to be sure that you are committed, because if you say, oh, it's not working out, you're just re-traumatizing that child for the
Hmm.
next situation. So you've got to be totally committed. It's like, that's it.
Right. And that child may have also already been through various homes of relatives where it didn't work out. Maybe they were
Hmm.
placed with, you know, a cousin or an aunt and they already had 4 or 5 children in the home and the
Hmm.
dynamic was just really hard. And those relatives maybe were like, okay, sure, we can try. Come on, just bring them over. We'll try. But they had no real calling to it, no real desire for it. Um, they were just like, well, I'm not going to say no, but it is not something that they were endeavoring toward and planning. They weren't thinking of it as like the long term, this is my life now. They were just
Hmm.
like, oh, my cousin's child needs somewhere to go. So, of course, and it's a little bit, I don't want to say neglectful of how deep that experience is for a child that has to now suddenly be thrust into a family that they have never lived with and they're trying to find their place in the dynamic.
Yes.
And
Yep.
I think when it's purposeful and intentional that you are seeking the right family, that's basically what you're saying. You're
Yes.
seeking the right family for that child.
Yes. And again, there's always introduction, there's always a transition. It's not like, you know, a child is just going to be placed in your home. Well, here you
Mm-hmm.
go.
Yeah.
It's just not that. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not only for the child, but it's for you, parents, family members. It's so that everybody can get to know each other. And sometimes we don't even tell the child right away. It's like you're meeting like at a park, because how traumatic can that be? If hey, we're going to meet a family that might want to adopt you,
Mm.
and then it not happen. So, so it's very calculating, and it's very therapeutically driven, you know,
Mm-hmm.
um, just for everybody's sake.
And so people listening might be like, really? You just would meet up at a park? That's a real thing?
Yeah,
How did those go?
can go. It can go really well, and it could be just a happenstance meeting,
Mm-hmm.
in a park, playing games or, just kind of introduction. It doesn't have to be anything formal. How many times do you go to the park when you meet somebody and you wind up chit-chatting? It could
Mm-hmm.
be just as simple as that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but, for a child, you have to be very careful about how you're approaching it, because this isn't like a situation where they're, on display and you get to choose. It's, it's, you have to be really careful.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Emotions run high. I would never, even if you wanted to bring your children, that's totally fine. But you just don't say anything. You just kind of like see what happens. And that may
Yeah.
happen a few times, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and wow, what a great thing, after a few times, this child is getting to know who you are, right? And then, everyone's getting to see, how things are working. So
Mm-hmm.
that's just one part of the process. Um, but very rarely, unless it's in foster care, is there ever a time where a child is just like, boom, just placed in your home, you know?
Right. In the
Yeah.
foster system, because there's a foster family or some sort of home already provided for the child who is available now to be adopted. In private adoption, usually the child is still with the parent, right, who is trying to make a decision, and then that customized transition plan can kind of be a little faster, a little more
It
sudden.
can be a little faster, but it still involves a social worker. It's
Mm-hmm.
still, there's there's still professionals in play, to ensure that a transition takes place before a child is, you know, brought to someone's home.
Yeah.
And it's important. So like either way, that's an important step, is
Mm-hmm.
the transition period, to kind of get to know each other, to understand, what you're getting into, make sure that certain services are in place that may be needed. Those are things that are all kind of pre-planned before a child is ever placed there. And then, in both cases, there's a social worker in the private sector. It would be a home study writer, would be coming out and visiting you to make sure that you're doing okay, and to make sure that the child is thriving, and to make sure that you have the services that you need. So,
I love that you brought that up, Linda, because that segues right into the next thing I was going to ask you about. We talked in the first episode of this series about how older child adoption, those days can be hard.
mhm,
Those days can be really challenging, and those days can stretch for many weeks and months, right?
mhm.
That hard transition can be long, and it can be a little draining for some people. I think it wouldn't be unusual if you felt a little exhausted sometimes.
Yes.
I think most parents go through that, but especially if you're trying to transition an older child into your family who especially has obviously had trauma, right? But what are some of the unique joys that families have shared with you, or how, what position would you say, frame of mind, adoptive parents should have with their expectations of getting joy out of this?
So one thing that I want to stress is when you take on this role, it's a forever thing. It's not a temporary thing if it doesn't work out. It shouldn't be that way, because if that happens, you're re-traumatizing that child.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be in the mindset that even when things get hard, even when things get sad, we're in it together.
Mm-hmm.
That's the message that the child needs to hear, and that's the message that you need to give. And you need to feel it, and you need to genuinely accept that. Because if you don't, it's never going to work. The whole point of you, there's a period called honeymooning when everything is great, and then there's a period where they start like acting out on their grief and their trauma and all of that. And you are the adult. You have to not be reactive to that kind of thing, but show them that no matter what, I got you. We're going to figure this out, and then move towards that. And being consistent and being committed. Those are the two main things. So if you're doing that, then you will find joy in the little moments. And you and I talked about the little moments a little while ago. And little
Mm-hmm.
moments are just unique little things that you have to make sure that you're looking, observing, and you see it. Don't let things go by. If you're talking about a baby, it's like first crawling. You're talking about an older child that comes into your home and accidentally slips, or doesn't accidentally slip, but one day just calls you mom or calls you dad, but never asked. That is the true sign of you're making progress. They're building trust. When
Mm-hmm.
you see them opening up about their family history and sharing with you what's going on instead of keeping it in, that's a joy. That's progress. So I'd say the biggest joy is seeing the little drips of progress that happen along the way in everyday life that, a lot of times people don't notice that, but you will notice it with a child that's come into your home. Kind, be consistent, you know, um, let them build trust. And
Mm-hmm.
once they build trust, then everything else will work out.
And sometimes I feel like those moments can happen unexpectedly. Like, let's say you're out in public or at someone else's house and you overhear them referring to you.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Or my mom did this, or my mom did that, but they haven't called you mom at home yet, you know?
Uh-huh.
So,
So
or
sweet.
dad.
I just love that.
Yeah. So, I mean, those are important, but you have to be aware, because
Mhm.
sometimes you get so wrapped up in the, oh my goodness, the behaviors are hard and this is a really hard stage. Well, always remember that most of the time it is
Mm.
a stage that you have to get through. It's
Mhm.
like, the terrible twos, and the threes. Like every stage has a different nuance, and it's the same when a child comes into your home that is older. They have stages of grief. They have
Mhm.
stages, of trauma that they experienced. And, you're depending on what their history was, you're going to experience all of that and then some.
Mhm.
But just remember, you just need to be consistent. They have to feel loved. They have to feel safe, and they have to build trust.
Mhm. I think that makes older child adoption different from newborn adoption, doesn't it? Like,
Oh, yes.
because a newborn or young infant, they don't really evaluate whether or not you're someone worthy of their trust.
Well, I mean, there can be a little transition with an infant too.
Yeah.
That's why it's so important to have skin to skin bonding
Mhm.
and, you know, um, because if they weren't nurtured, like let's just say in the NICU,
Yeah.
or if they were home in an unstable environment for a couple of months before they were, you know, placed for adoption, there may be some same, but
Yeah.
a different
Mhm.
approach to, soothing the level of trust that they need. So, but with older, they can articulate it, you know.
That's a big
So,
difference, right? From
mhm,
infant adoption to adopting an older child. They can express themselves verbally.
mhm.
That's a big one, I think.
Yep,
But I
yep,
think that's helpful, right? Even if the things that they're saying aren't your favorite things, whether it's something they're sharing about their history that just like breaks your heart, and they're just saying it so matter of factly,
mhm,
like maybe they're describing how um, their fridge was always empty.
mhm. Hoarding,
Hmm. Yeah.
they could, sometimes they'll react to a different kind of parenting style that they're used to. They
Hmm.
may have been used to, you know, grabbing food wherever they can,
Right.
and, having food set on the table, you know, instead of like eating it all right away, they could take some of it and like want to put it in their pockets. I've seen it happen,
Hmm.
so that they could have it later when they might need it. It's all about what they've
Yeah.
been exposed to before. And, you have to be
Hmm.
observant and just see those things and just quietly figure out how to work through them,
Hmm.
and a lot of times, if you explain your action to an older child in a very calm way, they may not, react to it right away. But if you're consistent, behaviors will change.
Hmm.
It will all change. So, um, and it could be your parenting style, could be a trigger to something that they didn't like. Like, let's just say, um, go to your room. You need to go to your room and, practice timeout and just kind of be calm for a minute. And let's just say every time this child was said they needed to go to their room, it could be that like Big Brother came in and did something to her. So
Hmm.
it'd be a trigger. So,
Hmm.
so that's why it's so important to be observant, because they may not say it right away,
Hmm.
but if you see something that is like an awful reaction to something that you're doing, sit back for a minute and think, okay, what triggered that? You
Right.
know,
Hmm.
so, but there are joys, lots of joys, and the biggest joy is when you get through the hard stages and when you see those little moments.
Hmm. Right. And like we were sort of talking about last time, that the harder days become fewer and the normal days start to
Exactly.
outnumber the hard
Yeah.
days. And it's like before you even know it,
Yeah.
now you're
You don't
settled
think
in.
about it. It's like, whoa,
Yeah.
we had a good month.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Another
So
thing that
it
could be
sneaks up on
different,
you.
and I love that. I would love to imagine, adoptive parents who've been going through the hard days and they've been diligent, patient, and kind. Maybe they felt like they were going to lose it at some point, but they had some support they could vent to.
Yes.
And they had a
Yes.
social worker who was reassuring them and giving them the right tools, because you're not, as adopted parents or any parent, you're not expected to know everything, right?
No, you're not. Just know where to go where you can get the help that you need or the
Mm-hmm.
information that you need. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I mean, it's parenting 101 in my book.
And be honest, right?
Yeah.
Even though it may feel like, well, was it the way I said it? Was it something I chose to do that caused a bad negative reaction in the child? But if you can be honest with a social worker or whoever your support is, um, and they are obviously a professional, that they can help reassure you that you did nothing wrong, or maybe they can provide some gentle, correction for the next time around.
Mhm.
But parenting is always going to be a learning curve.
Always. I mean,
Hmm. No matter
I'm
who the child is.
my children are in their 30s. I'm still learning. It's a different stage. Every
Yeah.
every stage is different. And so, it is something that is a constant. You're always in the process of learning and you never know enough. You just don't,
Right. But at
and
least in adoption, you have like a social worker who's helping you.
yeah, you just make sure you have your tribe. You know what I
Yeah.
mean by having a tribe is like,
Hmm.
have your people that you can like vent to, that you can talk to, that can, help you with answers and say that you're not doing anything wrong. Maybe try it this way. It's just, I think, as a parent, you need reassurance too.
Yeah.
That your method, like what are you doing? Or one day your child could be your biological child, any child says, I hate you, or you're
Hmm.
not my mother, or you're not my father, or those words, they're words to them and if you react to them, they know they could use that again because you'll react to it.
Hmm.
So you just have to be careful and be careful with your words because words you can't take back,
Yeah.
especially as an adult. If you say things, you know, you in a heated moment, those things are remembered and it
Hmm.
doesn't help build the trust that you need. Um,
Right.
and you can't take them back because they were already said. You can
Hmm.
apologize for saying something that you didn't really mean to say, but you know what? It might still be there.
Hmm.
So, but apologizing helps.
Yeah, I like that. I think whether with a
Acknowledge.
biological child or a child that you're adopting or have adopted, acknowledging you could have done better and you wish you
I
would
could have
have
done
done
better.
better.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep. And I didn't know I wasn't, I could have done better until I did it, and that was
Hmm.
just like, oh, okay, so you're human,
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah. Right. That you're not the perfect one while a child is just always wrong. Wrong
Right.
behavior, wrong reaction,
Right.
wrong feelings.
Hmm.
Hmm. Another scenario that happens with a child coming into a new family is, just routines. What is your normal mealtime routine? Things that you may take for granted. For example, you sit down, everyone sits down, you thank the Lord for the meal, you put your napkin in your lap, you pick up your fork and knife, you take a bite of food. There have been scenarios when children didn't know these things and they have a completely opposite routine for mealtime. Maybe meals were pretty sporadic. Like you were saying, they just had to grab what they could. Maybe they never sat down at a table. Maybe
Hmm.
they've never been taught how to use a fork and a knife. They just eat with their fingers. And in some cultures, that's like totally normal anyway,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
that could be part of it too, right?
Hmm. Yep.
That their biological family they come from eats with their hands.
Yeah.
And so now they're trying to be assimilated into a family that eats with a fork and knife, but
Hmm.
children have to be taught that.
I have a story. So and this is not an adoption story, but it is a story about culture and children and adults.
Hmm.
So I had a neighbor who I adored, but um, when they moved in, we were still in the process of getting to know each other.
Hmm.
And they were from Sierra Leone
Hmm.
in Africa. And their middle child and my son were the same age and went to school together. And the husband and myself, when I was going back to school for social work, he was in the same classes with me.
Oh,
That's how we
wow.
met and how we found out we were neighbors, like,
Uh-huh.
5 doors
Wow.
down. So, my brother's friend, Conrad, probably was about 12, 10 or 12. And whenever he would come over, and he would never address me or my husband, he would never look us in the eye. If I were to talk to him, he would always look down, and then he would answer with short, small answers. And it was unnerving to me. I was like, Conrad, look at me. I'm talking to you. Please look at me. And I told his dad about that when we were in school one day, and he said, well, that is our culture. That is what we do when a child is around an adult, they look down. That's part of the culture, and it's very different here. And of course, they grew to be different, and I grew to be different. But he also did this. He would call up on the phone and just not say anything until I did. He wouldn't say, hi, Mrs. Rotz, can I speak to Chris? It would be like dead silence, and I would have to say, Conrad, is this you? Cultural. But,
Yeah.
it was just respectful. Like once I learned, it was fine. Conrad, is this you?
Mm-hmm.
And same. And then he was able to, but it was very difficult for him to adjust to that. And it just took time. And it
Mm-hmm.
didn't matter whether he learned to do it or not, or whether he ever wanted to be comfortable with, looking me in the eye. Once I knew, it was like, okay, that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
and that's just similar to when kids come into, an adoptive home. It's like you don't know what their rules were, you don't know what their environment was, and sometimes, you might be able to get information about how it was, depending on how open that child is. But sometimes you kind of got to grow into it and just figure it out by observing, you know.
Mm-hmm. And I think too, just respecting that, hey, they might have had totally opposite foods as well. Like
Oh,
maybe all
yeah.
their foods were just kind of instant packaged. Maybe they never sat down to like a salad and you have to pick your salad dressing and then you're expected to
Hmm.
chew vegetables,
Hmm.
which if you're not used
Yeah.
to that, your
Hmm.
palate needs a chance to adjust, right? And
Hmm.
it can be all completely foreign to them if they've, and I know this might sound extreme, but if they've just had cereal,
Hmm.
you know?
Cereal, McDonald's, you
Hmm.
know.
Hey, don't judge me
um,
for my McDonald's.
mm,
But it's
Me
true.
neither.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's just different. Some could have eat in the car like all the time,
Yeah.
you
Hmm.
know.
Chicken nuggets constantly, no
Or,
other.
or what if they were allowed to sit on the couch and watch TV and eat, but your rule is to sit at the table,
Hmm.
right? Then there's going to be a behavior because what they're used to, okay, it's time for dinner. So they want to grab their stuff and they want to go sit on the couch and they want to watch like some show on TV.
Hmm.
But your rule is, and what you're accustomed to is there's no TV and we sit at the table and we just have family time.
Yeah.
And it's like completely misunderstood behavior. Then it would be,
Hmm.
that could lead to, some sort of a tantrum or, whatever. And you just have to be, okay, we'll ease
And it
into
can
this.
feel ease into it, right? And also, I think that's where the family as a whole needs to support and understand the child because if you already have other children that you're parenting that have grown up with you and they know how to use a fork and knife and they know that they're expected to eat a healthy amount of vegetables and they know
Hmm.
screen time is not dinner time, you know.
Hmm.
And every now and then you might have chicken nuggets, but it's not every day.
Hmm.
And then a child comes into the family and a part of them perhaps desperately wants to belong, but they just don't know how. And
No,
it's
not yet.
just the differences are so loud, especially like at mealtime, when everyone else in the little pack is doing the same thing, and then the child is just trying to figure out how does this work? And their brain isn't accustomed to it. So, like if you're used to eating while you're watching TV, your brain is expecting I zone out and I watch TV while I just chew.
Hmm. It's true.
Yeah. It's a big adjustment.
I want to take a moment to highlight our sponsor, the Lifetime Adoption Foundation, a nonprofit that's doing incredible work behind the scenes to support adoption in lasting, meaningful ways. Lifetime Adoption Foundation offers college scholarships for birth mothers, helping them take that next step in their future after making an incredibly selfless choice. The foundation also provides adoption education so that women and families have access to the information they need to make informed, thoughtful decisions. And through generous donations, they're able to provide grants to help with the placement of children who may face longer waits for adoption, which may include children who are older, part of a sibling group, or have medical needs. Be part of something that truly changes lives. Visit lifetimeadoptionfoundation.org to learn more or to make a tax-deductible contribution today.
Will test you too, because they come into your home already, maybe not even knowing that they have this preconceived idea of what's going to happen. It's temporary. They're going to get rid of me, right? And you have to know that they need reassurance that that's not going to happen, because until they feel safe and comfortable, they're going to be on guard. They're not going to be comfortable. It's up to you to help them feel safe.
Mm-hmm. And beyond just like their behaviors, but you're also, I think, as adoptive parents, trying to understand their unique personality and to let them be able to let their hair down. This is their home too. This isn't summer camp. You're not babysitting someone else's child for a couple weeks.
Right.
This is your child, and
right.
Their personality, if you adopt an older child, their personality is already starting to naturally emerge, and you want to nurture that. But that can be challenging too for a family sometimes.
Yeah.
And for the child.
Mm-hmm. Just know that it is not an impossible task. It's just, but it is, it's trying, and it's rewarding. And it's trying, and it's rewarding. So, just this too shall pass. This is what I always say. It's like, you get through this too shall pass. And it may be hard for a little bit, night terrors, crying in the middle of the night. What if they want to like sleep in your bed and that's not your thing? Go sleep in theirs. You don't have to teach them that it's okay to sleep in your bed, because some people don't. That is not something that some people, abdicate and do. But there's no reason why you can't just go lay in their bed for a little bit until they feel safe, right?
Yeah.
So you're teaching them that, you're there and you're their safe person, but you're teaching them, boundaries.
And I've heard some families share that they can have a great day, but then bedtime is really the hard time when they start missing, their birth family, their siblings. They start thinking about their past a little more.
Or it's hard to go to sleep because maybe, maybe they were left alone at night.
Yeah.
So
many scenarios.
Yeah.
Which is where,
or like if it's a sibling group. Here's another one. Like, okay, let's just say that you are taking on a sibling group of like 2 or 3, right? The oldest one was taking care of the other ones. That oldest one is still going to do that in your household, right? Yeah. And that one is the one that's going to be in the know. And you may have like, a battle of the wills. Right. But really and truly, you don't need to do that. You need to observe what that one is doing, right? And let that one continue to do it, but then also let that one learn that they can be a child, and I'll take over this for you. But if you want to do it for now, that's fine. But why don't you go, enjoy your friends, or, do something that you like to do. You got to figure out like how you can like maneuver that away, because a lot of times the older child in a sibling group is parentified. We call it parentified. And they feel totally responsible for the whole thing, right? So
yeah,
that's another.
And that child who has been parentified they have their routine. They have their little parenting routine for meals
Mhm.
and bedtime.
Mhm.
And it's all based on just what they figured out works, how they get through the day, and what works for that unique child. It may not be what was always best and ideal that, a 35-year-old parent would do versus like a 9-year-old would do for
Mhm.
a 4-year-old sibling. But there must be a feeling like if I'm 12 years old and I've been the one taking care of my two younger siblings, and then I come into this family, a little bit of a feeling of being dismantled a little bit. Like,
Of course.
I've
Of
been their
course.
authority. They do what I say, and this is why I do it, and I have reasons why we do it this way.
Mhm. Yep. And they're very hyper vigilant in terms of they're always watching for the next shoe to drop.
Hmm.
Like what's, you know, okay, how am I going to finagle through this scenario? It's always walking on eggshells kind of thing. So, you have to watch out for that too.
Yeah. But
Oh,
I love your example of encouraging them to go be with their friends, go outside and play. You
in
can read a
your
book,
in
I'll
your
take over from
time,
here in
you
your
know,
in
in
time.
your
Right.
time, you know.
Hmm.
We're not saying that you're doing anything wrong.
Yeah.
Thank you for teaching me what they need.
Hmm.
I'm going to help through that so that you have more time to do some of this stuff. And it'll take a while. But, the older parentified children do take a little bit of time to kind of relax and let somebody else be responsible.
Hmm. And I've heard of cases where it's a child as young as 4 years old taking care of their infant
Oh yeah.
sibling, the diapering, the feeding,
Hmm.
keeping out of harm's way. I've heard of those scenarios. So if you're 4 years old and you've been parentified since then, it's going to take some time to change that routine and that mindset.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So a couple myths. One is, myth versus reality when it comes to older child adoption. There is this myth that older children don't want to be adopted. I mean, we have this picture in our mind of like these adoptive parents who are well-meaning and they just want to make a difference in a child's life and they're just
Hmm.
like trying to love this child so well, and that the child is like, no thank you, I do not need to be adopted, I'm
Hmm.
fine, you don't have to help me, I can help myself, I'll manage fine on my own. Is that
Hmm.
reality? Is that a myth? Do older children not want to be adopted?
I'm not going to say that doesn't happen. I mean, there are
Right.
some older children that don't want to be adopted. But more often,
Mm,
children do want to be adopted, even if they don't articulate that they do, because
right.
because they're so fearful that it's not going to happen for them. They've already put up
Mm,
that guard.
yeah.
So yes, there are children that don't want to be adopted. I have done adoptions. My oldest adoption that I did while I was in foster care was the day before she was turning 18, and for 4 years she was a runaway and did
Mm,
not. I'm taking care of my sisters, making sure that everything's okay, and I don't want to be adopted. And she wound up being adopted by a lovely family the day before she turned 18. And I
wow.
still talk to her, and she's 35.
Why do you think in the very end, what happened? Why did she decide in the end to be
Well,
adopted?
she allowed herself to live with a family that was in the neighborhood where she was just running from like couch to couch, and she would call me every week and tell me how she was doing, but she wouldn't tell me where she was. I'd look for her for the longest time, um and then every week she would call like on time every time. She would call
Wow.
her guardian ad litem all the time. She just
Hmm.
wouldn't let anybody know where she was. And she wound up allowing me to talk to the family that she wound up living with and see, you know, if they would be willing to adopt her. And they wanted to.
Wow.
Yeah, they wanted to adopt her. And so she said, okay. And it was the day before she turned 18. Hmm. Yeah.
I
She's a
think
sweet
some.
girl.
I think I've actually had calls on our adoption helpline about with, like, let's say a father would call in and say she ran away. And that's a fear, I think, that parents have. A lot of times they have that, whether it's an infant they're adopting or an older child. Usually an infant isn't running away because they're trying to get back to their birth family, right? Because you are their family if you adopted a newborn. But
Yes.
an older child may have a longing for their family and might not really understand why that's not the best option for them, living with their biological family.
Hmm.
So what do they do in that situation? What do adoptive parents do?
Open communication, open conversations, about the family. Be okay with it. You know what? If they're curious and they want to meet, or see their biological, why not?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it may not be a healthy situation, but if they're older and they've experienced, you know, hardship, then, you know, going back and seeing that again sometimes is a reminder that, okay, that really isn't a healthy environment for me, especially if they're, if they're old enough to run away, then they're old enough to see what's best for them.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes they just need to see it for themselves. You as mom and
Sometimes
dad,
they do. Yeah, sometimes.
you
And
can
they also
talk till
want
you're
to
blue in
see
the
how you
face.
react to it. So like,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
sometimes they just want to see like, what are you going to do about it?
Mm.
How are you going to react to it? And if you don't, and you say, okay, let's talk about this.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see what that would look like. And do you want to make it happen? Sometimes that's all they need to hear and it never has to happen.
Yeah.
So, it's hearing them, listening to what they're saying, and trying to work through whatever's going on. But yes, there are some children that say they don't want to be adopted. And, you know, in some states, they have a choice after a certain age. They can say yes or no. So those children are not, actively looking to be adopted. The ones that are out there and in need of, parents, those are the ones that are, yes, they're okay wanting to be adopted.
So
So you can say that most children that are out there, are looking to be adopted.
how do you know, as adoptive parents hoping to adopt an older child, how do you know whether or not they want to be? Do they just tell you, I want to be adopted? They just tell their
Yeah,
social worker, I.
you have to tell a child, that this is the plan, and
Mm-hmm.
they'll tell you, I don't want to be adopted. And so if they're, 10 and younger, then there's some therapy that needs to be addressed because, you know, they have to get to a point where they're okay with that thought. If they're older than that and they say that they don't want to be adopted, there are times when, okay, that's not the plan. The
Mm-hmm.
plan will be that, we're going to place you, with a foster family that can help you to live independently when you age out of the foster care system or whatever. But like in the private sector, it's very rare that, there's children of that age.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time, it's children, that mom is making a decision for them and they're too young to say, no, I don't want to be adopted.
Mm-hmm. Which is why you are the perfect person to have this conversation, Linda, because you have a balanced amount of time in private sector and
Yeah.
fostering, the
Yeah.
foster system. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've
Yep.
seen all sides of it.
Yeah. I've seen a lot, a
A
good
lot.
bit, a good bit, but
And
not
another myth.
certainly not ever. I have certainly not experienced every scenario, but a good number.
And you social workers talk with each other and cross-reference notes, right, about scenarios too. So I'm sure you're fine.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
there is a myth that, well, just love her, just love him. It'll be enough. Just pour love into that child, and that will be enough.
Yeah, that's a myth. So, I mean, you
What
can
you
go
said.
into it and you can say, I love that child. I'm gonna love that child, but that child's gonna do things that make you feel like you can unlove that child for a little while.
Yeah.
So that's not it. It's really going into it. Yes, you're loving that child. Of course, you don't ever want to unlove a child, but it's consistency, it's commitment, it's, diligence, because love just doesn't do it all. It's a combination of all of it that builds trust for them. And the biggest thing is commitment and consistency. Those are the
Hmm.
main things.
I think too, love is really good fuel. Love can compel you to do the work and stay the course. It's not just the be all end all for the child, though. What they need to receive is much more than just love. They need all the support and the therapy and time and patience.
Sometimes families who say, I, all this child needs is love. I think a family needs to look within, because maybe that's what you need. And
Mm,
guess what? You're not going to get an instant gratification out of that. It's
mm-mm.
not instant gratification. It is something that you will grow into. And a child is not going to love you immediately because they don't know you. They don't
Yeah.
know you well enough. You haven't built, trust and rapport with them enough yet.
Hmm.
So you're not going to get that feeling right away. You're not going to get that feeling back, you know? So you have to be honest with yourself about your own feelings going into it.
I like that you said that. It's not a reciprocal relationship. You're a
Yeah.
parent. The child
Yeah.
owes you nothing,
Yeah.
whether biological or through adoption. Maybe if you're a biological child you've brought up since birth or adopted since birth, a little respect.
Well,
But really it's not a reciprocal thing. It's not a meet me where I am as a parent. I'm loving you, so now love me
now
back.
you
It's
need to love me back. That's just not,
it's not
that's
it.
not the way it goes, you
Right.
know?
And there's this other myth that we're just going to have an instant connection. Bonding will be instant. It'll just be perfect and we'll meet, we'll lock eyes, and we'll just go off into the sunset together and be a happy family. So the myth that bonding is instant.
It can feel like it's instant at
Sure.
times,
Yeah.
right? And then, when reality sets in and this, short period of time ends, that bond could look very distant. Like you'll be saying, well, what happened to that? Right? But they're testing where they are. But eventually the bond will be great. You'll find that you'll have things in common. You'll build skills together. You, you might decide that you're gonna, do a craft together, like learning how to sew or go hiking or, fishing is always really good. Like you'll find something that you will connect with. And once you find that thing, then bonding is going to take place. It's
Mm-hmm.
just going to naturally evolve, but you can't force it, you
Mm-hmm.
know.
Right. It would definitely take time. I think if you've ever felt a bond with anyone, you've noticed how it takes time, whether it's a
Mhm.
new friend or just anyone that
Yeah,
comes into your life. It,
yes.
it does take time.
Mhm.
Yeah. Are there any other myths or things that are on your mind, Linda, that families should be aware of for the road ahead?
Well, there's a common myth that I used to hear all the time is that, like, older children are damaged. They're going to come to your home damaged.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I would say that they all come with something, but I would never say damaged. These are children that experienced a different way of life, and an understanding of life than what you may have an understanding about. And so damaged really isn't the word that I would use for, you know, emotional disconnection or grief or past trauma. It it's more like, you need to understand from where they came and then help them through, whatever that is.
Mm-hmm. I
So
love the way you put that we shouldn't use that label, you're damaged. Like you were saying last episode. Well, a lot of the tricky mindsets people have to overcome are from labels. They were labeled and now they have to overcome like unlabel me, please.
unlabel,
Yeah.
just, this, this child has ADHD and bipolar tendencies. Okay. How do you know that really?
Mm,
Sometimes some of that information is coming from an unreliable source,
right.
right? And so like, you could say that a particular person is saying this child is out of control. He has bad behaviors and this and this and this, when in reality, you put him in the next scenario and he's not reacting the same way.
Yeah.
So again, it's just taking the time to see what's going on, understanding from where they came, and trying to like cross that bridge of little things that are going to pop up, until you get to the other side, and recognizing all those little firsts, and those little good things that you're going to see. You got to recognize them, because the big things, they'll feel big and they may overshadow the little things. You got to see those little things, because
Mm-hmm.
those are the bigger successes.
I can imagine like if you kept trying to give them a hug and they kept being resistant,
Mm-hmm.
and then one day you feel them actually relax and hug you back a little.
Mm-hmm. Or just out of nowhere, they'll just come and just give you a hug.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so it wouldn't be the reaction like, you'd want to be like, oh my gosh, you're having the best time. You don't want to do that. All you want to do is just hug them back,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Be
but
cool.
be cool, because what you want to do is, but you just
Yeah.
got to be cool,
Mm-hmm.
because that was one of those real moments that you just need to embrace.
Anything else, Linda, you'd like to add to this episode in our series on older child adoption at the
It's
moment?
never
Looking
too
through your
late to
notes.
parent an older child.
Mm-hmm. What do you mean by that? Never too late for whom?
It's never too late for anybody,
Like
and it's never too late for an
parents?
older child. It's just
Mm,
not. If
right.
they want, if they want it, then, and you want it, it's never too late. Just like my girl Sandra, who decided to be adopted at age 18. You know,
Mm,
um, it's 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 never too late to give guidance, your wisdom, show respect um, to anyone, influence, give them your good, give them their good, and teach them, so that when they go out into life on their own, that they have a good foundation.
mm-hmm. Right. And that through adoption too, maybe they never actually end up being fully on their own. Now they have a family. Now they have at least one parent to come home to.
Yep.
Yeah. So, well, thank you, Linda. And I look forward to the next, I think, final part of our series. We'll make it a three-part
Okay.
series.
Okay.
Believe it or not, I think this was initially one one podcast episode, but
It
we
was a lot.
realized it was way too much to unpack.
Yes. Yes, it
So,
was.
well, thank you again for listening and being here for the podcast, Let's Talk Adoption. And if you're listening and you have questions for Linda, if you have some topic ideas for future episodes, maybe you know someone that's touched by adoption that would be great for us to talk to, or maybe someone who works in adoption that would be a great guest for us to have on the show. You are welcome to make those suggestions at letstalkadoption.com. You can write to us right through the website. And also be sure to subscribe so that you never miss an episode. And thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you in the next one.